the Golden State Killer.
Joseph DeAngelo, now
Golden
70.
State Killer. Joseph DeAngelo was an
Notorious Golden State Killer remains behind bars. Joseph James DeAngelo appeared in...
Hello everyone, this is Ayunisha Mimi, and today we will discuss about one of the most famous cases in American history, that is the Golden State Killer. Imagine living in fear, knowing that a dangerous criminal could enter your home at night without warning. For many families in California, this is their reality during the 1970s and the 1980s. So who and why did he call as a Golden State Killer? The Golden State Killer was identified as Joseph James DeAngelo, a former police officer from California. For more than 40 years, his identity was remained mystery, where making him one of the most wanted criminals in the United States. The name of the Golden State Killer was come from the California itself, where it famously known as a Golden State. At first, the investigators did not realize that all the burglaries, sexual assault, and the murders were all committed by the same person. As a result, he was given a different nickname based on what he did. However, when the investigators start link all the cases together, the media start referring him as a Golden State Killer. Between 1974 and 1975, he was known as the Visalia Ransacker, committing more than 100 burglaries and several violent attacks in the city of Visalia. From 1976 to 1979, he became known as the East Area Rapist after carrying out more than 50 sexual assaults across Northern California. Later, between 1979 and 1986, he was called the original Night Stalker after murdering at least 13 victims in Southern California. Although the investigators had many victim eyewitnesses, fingerprints, and the forensic evidence from the crime scenes, but the DNA technologies at the time were still limited. There were no matching DNA profiles in a criminal database, making the investigator cannot identify the offenders. Years later, advance in forensic science changed everything. Scientists re-examined the biological evidence left at the crime scenes, and the DNA revealed the identity of Joseph James DeAngelo as a killer for the case, solving one of the longest running cold cases in history. But how did DNA lead the investigators more than 4 decades? Let's continue with our next presenter for more details. Thank you.
During several sexual assaults, investigators recovered biological evidence left behind by the offenders. Among the most important was semen, which became the most valuable evidence collected throughout the investigation. Other biological evidence such as saliva, blood in some cases, and later touch DNA also had forensic value, but semen provided the strongest source of the offender's DNA. Finding body fluid is not always easy because dry semen may become invisible over time. Crime scene investigators first carefully searched clothing, bedsheets, pillowcases, and other items from the assault scene. They used visual inspection and specialized sources to locate suspected semen stains that could not be seen with the naked eye. Once a possible stain was identified, investigators collected it using sterile cotton swabs or submitted the entire items as evidence. Every sample was carefully labeled, sealed, and preserved to prevent contamination before being sent to the forensic laboratory for the DNA analysis. Body fluids are among the most valuable forms of forensic evidence because they contain DNA that is unique to every individual. In this case, semen was especially important because it was deposited directly by the offender during the sexual assault and produced a high-quality single-source DNA profile. Even after more than 40 years, this preserved DNA became the key that eventually identified the Golden State Killer.
The Golden State Killer is the most prolific serial predator.
So, one of the most important breakthrough in this Golden State Killer investigation came from DNA technology and also forensic genealogy. So, during the several attack, the offenders left behind biological evidence such as semen sample, which was then carefully collected and preserved by forensic investigators. Although this crime occurred between 1974 and 1986, the evidence remained suitable for further DNA analysis decade later.
So, the first step involved extracting DNA from the crime scene evidence and generating this DNA into a forensic DNA profile. Investigators then uploaded this profile into a combined DNA index system, or known as CODIS, which also known as a National Criminal DNA Database that used by a law enforcement agency across the United States. However, the investigator encountered a major problem. Despite repeated research, there is no match in the CODIS database. This means the preparator DNA was not present in the criminal database, causing the case to remain unsolved for more than 40 years.
Shows how police used genealogy websites to try to identify the notorious Golden State Killer.
In 2018, the investigator turned into an innovative method known as forensic genetic genealogy. So, instead of relying solely on the traditional forensic database, the DNA from the crime scene was further analyzed and converted into a format compatible with genealogical database. So, this DNA profile was then being uploaded to the GED Match, a public genealogical database usually used by individuals to search for their family history. Although no direct match was found, investigators identified several distant relatives of unknown suspects. Working alongside a forensic geologist, they began constructing extensive family trees and tracing generations of relatives. By analyzing family connection, geographic location, age, and other investigative information, authorities gradually narrowed the list of potential suspects. After approximately 4 months of genealogical research and traditional police investigation, investigators identified Joseph James DeAngelo as the primary suspect. They then conducted covert surveillance and collected discharged DNA sample from him. Laboratory testing confirmed that his DNA matched the DNA collected from the original crime scene.
These Golden State Killer cases become a landmark example on how forensic genealogy can solve a cold case that once considered impossible to be solved. The body field evidence preserved the offender's DNA for more than 4 decades, allowing modern forensic technology to finally identify the preparator and also bring justice to the victim. However, this breakthrough raises an important question. How does this biological evidence succeed while the evidence such as eye testimony, police sketches, fingerprint, and any other evidence fail? To answer this question, we need to examine why body field evidence is the most important and decisive evidence in these cases.
To understand why the Golden State Killer case remained unsolved for over 4 decades, it is important to compare the different types of evidence available to investigators. Eyewitness testimony provided valuable information, but human memory can be unreliable and affected by stress. Police sketches depended heavily on witness description and were often inconsistent. Fingerprint evidence was either unavailable or insufficient for identification, while shoe print could only provide class characteristics and could not identify one specific individual. In contrast, biological evidence provided something that no other evidence could offer, a unique DNA profile that could be linked to a single individual with a high degree of scientific certainty. Why body fluid evidence was the strongest? Body fluid evidence, particularly semen sample recovered from the crime scenes, become the most important evidence in this investigation for several reasons. First, DNA profiles are unique to each individual, allowing investigators to identify a specific person rather than a group of possible suspects. Second, biological evidence can remain useful for decades if properly collected and preserved, as demonstrated in the Golden State Killer case. Third, DNA evidence not only identifies suspects but can also exclude innocent individuals, reducing the possibility of wrongful accusations. Finally, DNA analysis provide objective scientific evidence that is widely accepted in courts of law, making it one of the most reliable forms of forensic evidence available.
Golden State Killer case provides a very important lesson for future forensic investigation. Firstly, the biological evidence should be collected carefully and preserved for long-term storage, even if current technology cannot directly identify the suspect. Secondly, cold cases should be periodically re-examined using newly developed forensic technologies. Thirdly, the forensic genetic genealogy should continue use for serious violent crime where the traditional investigation method has been exhausted. Finally, the investigator must balance the scientific advancement with ethical and privacy consideration to ensure that justice is achieved responsibly.
In conclusion, although eyewitnesses, sketches, and traditional police investigation provide important clues, biological evidence in the form of body fluids ultimately become the decisive evidence that identify the Golden State Killer after more than 40 years. This case demonstrates the extraordinary power of forensic science and the importance of preserving evidence for future generations.